top six help or a guy that they might rely on to actually play and perform for them next year?
I think if they had their preference, it would be that he plays and performs, entry-level deal, younger body, all the reasons we know. And it's amazing that in Toronto, like any other player who goes and wins a Memorial Cup and playoff MVPs and Memorial Cup MVPs, and he'd be like, of course he's playing in the top six. Why wouldn't he play in the top six? But with Toronto, there probably are understandable question marks with Cowan if he can do that. But yeah, I mean, if somehow you could put him on the second line and it worked, that'd be really good. Like that would be a perfect person to slot in there at an affordable number. So I mean and maybe that's what they want to see. Like maybe they will give him a chance. Although there is always, you run the risk, you let him try it. If it doesn't work, then can you trade him for quite as much? I'm not so sure. But this is not the trade deadline. There's no finish line on what happens today. They can do this all summer, trying to change their team, add players, subtract players, whatever it is. But for Toronto, I mean, I think Brad Treliving knows where their holes are, what they need to replace, what they need to try to augment, and Cowan would have to factor into that. But, if you're Nick Robertson, now you've not had the junior career of Ethan Cowan. I'm not saying he's the same player. But he might be saying, listen, I can score at the NHL level. Like, give me a look, too. Like, I think there's a few guys that might be wanting to angle for some of those good minutes.
So, Johnny, we just talked about the luxury of time.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I haven't, really been able to identify is what team is willing to not blow it up, but willing to part with players that are good players. Like everybody seems to be like, hey, we can take another step here this year. And I understand San Jose wants to get better. Chicago wants to get better. But they're not going to be playoff teams this year. So is there a team that you would identify that maybe Toronto would circle and say, give them 10 to 20 games and they'll be selling? Whether it's Pittsburgh or, maybe an organization that we're not focusing on that believes they're not a playoff team, but they're trying to at least sell to their ownership, to their fan base. We're going to give these players a run and see how it unfolds in the first 20 games of the season.
Well, I mean, I think the obvious answer, Noodles, is the one you mentioned, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Like, they have Brian Rust and Ricard Raquel.
Yeah.
Both are legit top six wingers. Both can score 30 goals when playing with good players. Both have decent contracts that the Leafs or any other team could probably absorb if you move out a little bit of money. And if you give them picks and prospects and good young players like an Ethan Cowan caliber player, you could get that guy. You could get him now probably if you wanted, but maybe you wait 10 or 20 games and Pittsburgh realizes they're not going to make it again. And the motivation for the team to move them and for the players to allow themselves to be moved grows a little bit. I think that will be a team that every other club in the NHL will circle and say, okay, let's watch them because eventually they're going to want to move off those guys. And the other guy, I don't know if he's a top six guy, but he's one of the best third-line players in the league, and that's that Blake Coleman. Yeah. I think Blake Coleman in his last year in Calgary, I don't know if they're going to want to extend him well into his 30s. He can fetch a pretty price with how good he is and the contract he's on. So I wonder, Calgary maybe not waving the white flag at all, but just saying, we're going to move off some of our expiring guys, Rasmus Anderson, Blake Coleman, and bring in young, talented players. That might be a guy, as the year goes along, that you could look at and say he could help us. Maybe not on your first line, but he's a very good player. He could probably play with Tavares and Nylander on a second line and help them.
MJ, when you look at the DNA change that Brad Treliving is seeking here, now he's sort of we had him on earlier in the show, and he sort of amended it to talk about it's a little bit about bringing in different players, but also about changing the internal mentality of the stuff between the years and big moments and all that stuff. But when you look at the way they're going to proceed with, they brought in some guys here. We all know the list. But in your experience, what can be the effect of the subtraction of a player as significant as Mitch Marner, a personality as significant as Mitch Marner? Is there a way you could spin it? Obviously, you're not replacing the 100 points, but there have been situations in sports of addition by subtraction just because it changes the mix somehow. How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, well, two thoughts. One, it's I don't want to be one piling on Mitch Marner as way out the door. You know, he was part of a group that didn't win, but he wasn't the only root cause of the fact that they didn't win. And it feels like the guys liked him. It's not like he was a problem. That somehow removing him and his game or his personality will somehow free up the other guys to go and become greater than they were when he was around. I don't think he had that kind of influence, but there's no doubt, like, the personality of a team is largely, you guys can attest to this, is largely dictated by their best players. And Mitch Marner was one of the best players. And so whatever that personality was, you know, the team would take some cues from it. And Hayes, you've referenced this a lot over the years. Not that you have a problem with any one of the big four guys, but they're all sort of wired similar. Mm-hmm. Sort of quieter, sort of internal, sort of driven to be great on their own, but not necessarily outwardly emotional or demonstrative, or someone who reacts in a physical manner rather than going to try to score. So I think, you know, taking Mitch Marner off of the team and replacing him eventually with a player who maybe does some things differently or reacts to stress differently or reacts to tight situations differently, even if they're not as good of a player, will that help steer the team in a little bit of a different direction? That's what you're hoping for, Fest, if you're talking about DNA change from maybe somebody leaving the team. But the other part about it is when Tree talks about growth and the guys that are there dealing with things differently, if it was easy, they would have done it by now. Like, exactly. This is not a new phenomenon. This is 10 years in the making. They've had plenty of stressful situations to learn, to react, and to, in theory, do something different the next time through. They haven't, as a group, done anything differently. This looks actually quite similar year after year after year, which is part of the frustration with a team this good. So it's easy to say, and unless, and I'm not even being flippant here, like, unless there's a commitment to, like, a sports psychologist or, like, you know, like some tangible change other than just saying, let's try to be different. Let's try to be bold. Let's try to be brave. Let's try to be courageous and embrace the stress. They've done that before, and it hasn't worked. So I don't know, eliminating Mitch Marner, talking about it out loud, I don't know if you can expect it to change significantly because, I don't know, if they could have, they would have.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's, you know, there's going to be a lot of carryover.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be a lot of the same team.
Right.
And they're a good team. Like, they're still a really good team. Like, they have both their goalies, all their defensemen. They're going to add some depth. Yes, Marner's out. That's a very significant regular season piece in particular. But, you know, Waz in. I don't know enough about Michelli to make a projection on what he's going to look like.
You know what he's like, though, Hayes? He might be like, I don't want to stretch too far. He plays a similar style of Mitch Marner, just not nearly as good. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, he's sort of a complimentary facilitator, creative with the puck, pass-first guy, not robust physically, relatively responsible, and he might get you, if he plays with good players, he might get you 50 points. So versus the 100 Mitch gets, but like that's sort of what he is.
Okay. Well, listen, if it pops here,